Shalom, everyone. It's April 25th, 2023. I'm Rabbi Alicia Magal at the Jewish community of Sedona and the Verde Valley, and this is our last class of this section of Introduction to Judaism. I wanted to begin with a review. It's been several weeks since we've seen each other, and the reason was that Passover came, and I wanted to find out what were your seders like. Did you go to one or two or three? I had at least three. And what were they like? And what new insights did you have? What traditions did you remind yourself of or learn for the first time? Love to talk about Passover to begin, because it's one of the major teaching points and traditions of Judaism. If you want to dive in one place, I would say Passover and Shabbat. So let me hear about your experiences for Shabbat. Why don't you unmute and share?
I'll be glad to start.
Thank you, Carol.
I had the pleasure of being at two seders at the synagogue, and they were both absolutely wonderful. They were different from one another. We had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old at our table at the first night of Seder, and they were both boys. And it reminded me and brought back when our kids were little and smashed matzah into everything and couldn't sit still. And so it just brought back wonderful, wonderful memories, and the feeling that the mom had of, I need to control my kids, and us going, no, you don't. They're kids, let them be kids. And there was, I think, probably 90 people, and it was really amazing. It was just amazing. What a great feeling of community. And then the second one that I went to was the Women's Havurah Seder. And boy, just to be in a room with like 50 women and dancing and laughing and singing, and it was just beautiful. And so, and my memories of our family seders were not very positive. And so this was really pretty wonderful. Our family seders went on forever and ever and ever and ever. And the youngest always felt really picked on. It wasn't done as an honor. And so it was so nice to be adult and to get to really enjoy Pesach the way that it should be. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those memories. And yes, we had to vacuum next to that particular table. There was matzah crumbs all over like snow. It was really quite amazing. And the Women's Seder, we really focus on the dedication of the women and in whose merit the Exodus happened. So it was the mother and the sister of Moses, the daughter of Pharaoh, I'm thinking in Hebrew, so that's why I'm stuttering here, the male dot, how do you say the ones who help somebody give birth? The
midwife.
Midwives.
The midwife.
When I'm thinking in Hebrew, it's hard for me to jump across. And so we danced and sang with Miriam across the sea to the tune of Debbie Friedman's "And the Women Dancing with Their Timbrels." It was really fun. And we also had an interesting experience with asking people what would their symbols of freedom be, and what are modern day plagues. So the idea is very ancient and traditional, but very current and applicable as well. I also led a Seder, a kind of model Seder for 30 high school students in Camp Verde. Not one Jew in the group, but they really got into it. And so I brought materials for the plagues, like cotton balls for the hail and frogs and beasts, little animals and stuff. And I would say, okay, throw the frogs, and there'd be frogs in the air, like thousands, and hail. The cotton went, and I said darkness. They all put on their sunglasses that I had told them to bring. So they were having fun, but with every step, I explained quietly something of the symbolism, and then asked them, "Hi, Nancy, welcome on. we're talking about our seders and what people liked and what experiences they had to review. And they've been studying Holocaust all year, and they wanted me to come, and it just so happened this was the time I could come and explain something of our history and how we pass on the tradition from generation to generation, and hopefully in a fun way where the youngest are honored and not picked on, and where they learn very quickly. By about age 4, they know the 4 questions, and we talk about different ways that people learn with the 4 children. And we talk about what are plagues in our day. And the kids really came up with some excellent suggestions and symbols of freedom. They had been prepared to think about those things. So I felt that that was a worthwhile activity for me to do. Hopefully next year I'll have a family Seder at our home. But this year it was all about the synagogue, and that's beautiful too. All right, any other people who want to share anything about being at a Passover Seder and what it meant to them? Pauline, you have your hand up? Or no, that's me. Never mind, that was my cursor. Yes, Anne.
Hello. So last year we did a family Seder, and we were Zooming with our kids, and we were here in Chicago, and that was wonderful. And that was my first Passover Seder. So, that was just a big learning experience for me. And then this year I went to the 2 Seders at the synagogue, and I like you, Carol, I love the women's Seder. It was just, boy, there's just something about women, it's like we all get together and we're just, and I loved, just everything from just the guests at the table, and, the kindness and just the reflective questions. And I was impressed that Rabbi Magal had such a different program, as you said, from the other one. It was, but equally, I was learning a lot. And then just at the end, everybody just got up and pitched in and helped out. And it's like, leave it to women. Of course, we rock. So it was, but the whole thing was just really enjoyable. So thank you.
Glad. Well, now it's tradition for you, right? Okay. Is there anything else anybody wants to add about Seder or symbols or how it was for them this year? If not, we'll move on.
I just want to say I've never been to one, and but I'd like to go sometime.
All right, come to us next year.
Yeah, let me know. Put it on the computer or something, remind me.
All right, be in touch with us, but like by the end of March, and we'll arrange it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sybil, you wanted to add?
Well, of course, I was at the 2 Seders at the synagogue, and and of course, Rabbi Magal did a fabulous job in both Seders in 2 different, very different ways, which is always, I'm sort of spoiled. I'm just used to her doing a fabulous job, so I sort of take it for granted sometimes. But what was interesting was all the different items that were going on, that people were putting on the Seder plates, talking about that sort of symbol of freedom. And I really enjoyed learning about the olives on the Seder plate. And I thought that was given all that's happening on the planet, that we need peace, and adding a symbol for peace was, I think, lovely.
Right, olive branch for peace in the Middle East and everywhere. Okay, well, I thought today we would review many of the teachings that we had in our first 3 sessions, and then move on to talk about the modern holidays that we're celebrating actually today and tomorrow in our calendar. So I'm going to share, and I hope this brings back some of the learning that you did before. We began with a Shehechianu, which is a blessing for marking special occasions or when you do something for the first time. So I'll just review that, and if you're all muted, you can try talking along with me and saying the words and reminding yourself of this very important prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Holy One, ruling over time and space, who has given us life, sustained us, and brought us to this memorable moment. You do that whenever something happens that seems like you want to mark it with a wow. And the root in in Shehechianu is chai, life. And there you have it, Shehechianu, who gave us life. It's a verb where the root is chai, life. And the next thing we studied was a history, I called it On One Foot, about the patriarchs, the matriarchs, Abraham and Sarah, and their next generations, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel and Leah, and the 12 sons and Dinah, giving rise to Joseph, who was sold in slavery in Egypt, rises to being the second in command to Pharaoh, and the rest of his family join him. And that's pretty much the end of Genesis. Then we move into Exodus, where we're 400 years later, and there's a Pharaoh who knows not Joseph. They don't know what honor Joseph had brought to Egypt. And at this point, the Israelites have multiplied, they are slaves, and they're living in the land of Goshen, the northeast part of Egypt. And at that point, Moses is called upon to lead the Israelites out, and through Exodus, we recreate their journey through the Sinai desert and to the edge of the eastern part of what's going to be Israel as they cross over into the promised land. But that doesn't happen yet. That doesn't happen in the Torah. Right now, we're in the desert, and we're receiving Torah at Mount Sinai. And once the Israelites have wandered for 40 years, Joshua, in the book of Joshua, brings them into the land from east to west, sort of north of the Dead Sea around Jericho. Then we learned about how the tribes, the 12 tribes, were dispersed and had their own territory in the land of Israel, with some of them moving a little bit. And in any case, we see that each of the tribes had land in the land of Israel and also across the Jordan. So half of the tribe of Manasseh and Gad and Reuben were on the east side. So there was this whole area of the Middle East, what's now Jordan, and that all the tribes had their own space and different alliances. And under King David and Solomon, it was united. And once Solomon died, his two sons split the kingdom into Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And that became Israel in the time of the kings, until there were wars and destruction. So Solomon's temple was the center of great celebrations, not only celebrations, but sacrifices. And the priests, the Kohanim and the Levites, were the ones that helped the people make their sacrifices for sin, for guilt, for well-being, for thanksgiving, all different reasons to bring sacrifices of various animals, grain. There were different kinds of sacrifices to be brought. And that was how, if you could call it a religion, it was how our will to get close to God was expressed, especially with this idea of the smoke going up to heaven and being received. But with the destruction of the first temple, there was an exile of the population of Judah all the way along the Fertile Crescent to Babylon. And that empire held them, and some came back to build the second temple, and many stayed in Babylon. They rebuilt the second temple, and about 50 years later, it was destroyed by the Romans, went up in flames, and we commemorate both of those destructions with Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, in the heat of the summer, when all these difficult, bad, destructive things seem to be happening throughout history. And that's when we really became Jews, based on being in Judah, the geographical place. But wherever we went, we then had the name of the Judahites, the Jews, and Judaism. From Roman coins showing Judea capta est, Judea is captured and is shown as a crying woman with a palm tree. We have the depiction here in a bas-relief of the golden menorah and sacred objects from the temple in Jerusalem inscribed on this big arch of Titus. It was a major big victory and shown on there as a historical depiction and kind of a tribute to the Romans. And it was a big disaster and catastrophe for the Jews. And I showed you a timeline of the first temple, and then after the exile, the second temple, and all of the incredible learnings and teachings that went on to continue Judaism, even past when the temple was destroyed. And we asked the question, how did these teachings in the Torah develop into later commentaries once there was no priesthood, no sacrifices, no temple? How did Judaism survive? And so we talked about how the Torah has the beginnings of our history, and it's the root of all later teachings and rulings. From Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, teaching about the creation and the patriarchs and how the Israelites got into Egypt, continuing with the story of Moses and the Exodus, continuing with the greatest gift of God, which is receiving Torah at Mount Sinai, how in the desert we built the Mishkan, a portable center of gathering and sacrifice and prayer, and about to enter the promised land after 40 years. That's the end of Deuteronomy. It's actually the end of Numbers as well. Deuteronomy is the second telling of the law. So then how did we develop? Well, the Tanakh is actually the Hebrew Bible, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. The first 5 books, the prophetic books, and the writings, including some of the Megillot, the scrolls that we read at different holidays. So Ecclesiastes we read at Sukkot, Song of Songs at Passover, Kohelet, that's Sukkot, right? And Ruth we read at Shavuot. So there are different writings that are included that are beautiful and poetic. Psalms we draw from very heavily in our prayer book. And as we go along, very often you'll see in the book, this comes from Psalm 103, this comes from Psalm 150, this comes, and so the Psalms are a source for ceremony, for life cycle, for prayer, because of their emotional content and poetry. So we needed to know how to apply these basic rules of the Torah in daily life. And that's where the Mishnah and the Gemara come in. The Mishnah was finished around 200 of the Common Era, and the Gemara was commentary on the Mishnah, and it was finished a few hundred years later. There's a Babylonian and a Jerusalem Talmud, but mostly we go by the Babylonian Talmud. And they are a combination of laws, that's halacha, which really is like the Tao. It means the way. It means holech means to walk. So it's how you walk in the world. But it also has a lot of interesting stories and folklore and customs. And so there's those 2 strands in the Talmud of narrative stories that we can tell, but also rulings and laws about how we light candles and when we count the holiday and how we celebrate. And for that, we learned the Torah blessing. I promised you to teach you some blessings. Here's the Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Holy One, ruling over time and space. You could translate that as the universe, who has sanctified us with your mitzvot, your commandments, and commanded us to busy ourselves with the study of Torah, or dive inside the words of Torah. And davar can be a word or it can be a thing. And so in Hebrew, words have the weight of actual objects and things and concrete physicality. Just want to make sure you know that words are not just wisps of sound that disappear. They have concrete weight and importance. And we asked the question, so how do you apply these ancient laws to modern situations? We've got electricity, we've got surrogate births, we've got space travel. I mean, how do you keep Shabbat, and how do you deal with all of these new innovations and still stay traditional? Well, in addition to the 42 volumes of the Talmud, they were reorganized into 14 volumes of the Mishnah Torah, a second telling of the Torah by Maimonides in the 12th century, and further consolidated into 4 volumes of the Shulchan Aruch, which means the set table. And that was a code of Jewish law, which was leaving out all the stories and just saying, bottom line, this is how you do it. This is how you celebrate. This is how you do the prayers. This is the rule for returning property. This is the rule for how you get married and divorced. This is how you bury, for people who didn't have time. So nobody could study, or fewer people could study the entire Talmud. So there was this concise volumes of the Shulchan Aruch. And responsa, which are answers to questions from ancient times, from Babylonian Talmud times, down to this very day, where letters are written saying, okay, what do we do? We're traveling by plane. Do we go by the time of what we left, or the place we're going? When is it really Shabbat for us, etc.? If we have a surrogate who's not Jewish, does it go by the egg or the sperm or the womb? So all of these questions had to be settled, and we have responsa by various very, very knowledgeable, studied rabbis. But every issue, any issue, can be traced back to precedent in the Talmud and back to a principle of the Torah. And that's really important to know. So we dig deep to find the precedent. And how do you light candles? Can you use electricity? Can you not? Can you have a timer that turns on the light so that you don't have to do the switch, etc., etc. So then we talk not only about rules and laws and customs, but what about the mystical teaching? What about the mystical traditions and meditations that are part of Jewish lore and part of the secret learning? And it was supposed to be taught only to those who had already learned Torah and Talmud. As a matter of fact, had to be 40-year-old married man. Well, we've broken that. You don't have to be 40, you don't have to be a man, you don't have to be married, but you do have to be grounded, because these are very powerful teachings. And it's known as Kabbalah, which means the receiving. So it's a meditative receiving, and part of it was written in the Zohar, which means the brilliance, or the light, the glowing. And one well-known teaching is the idea of Ein Sof, without end, which is hard for us to imagine, which is why so many cultures had idol worship, because you could see the stone or the gold or the wooden post, and here we can't see anything. We just have to think of Ein Sof, some force without end. It's beyond our understanding. And the 10 Sefirot is this is a model of the tree of life with different energy centers. And we talk more about that, and we will continue to. One of the foundational books was Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, which talked about the world of creation and souls and angels, and it hinted at a lot of the energies of the world. This is all done through meditation. And the funny thing is that the more the physicists and mathematicians and scientists learn, the more they actually come in sync with our ancient mystical teachings. So we start with the revelation at Sinai, where the giving of 10 commandments, which was more than just those 10 commandments. It had the reverberation of all the teachings and all the interpretations of all time. And the Zohar, which is radiance and splendor, retells the story, but wow, the way it talks about the nature of God, the Holy One, and how the universe was created and what happens to souls and what about good and evil. It's very, very dense, very hard to read the text without looking at the interpretation, especially the most contemporary one, and this is an example of it, by Danny Matt, who's spending the rest of his life turning out volumes, and I've studied with him from time to time. And his knowledge of Aramaic and of mysticism is just amazing. This is his life's work. And I gave you 2 examples to show you how dense the writing is. So, for instance, let's look at this one. Forming the concentric ring of that first sphere, one of the Sephirot, the flame was not white, not black, not red, not green, no color. And after this flame began to take on size and shape and dimension, then it produced radiant colors. From the innermost center of the flame gushed forth a host of colors which spread on everything beneath. And concealed within all of this was the hidden mystery of the infinite. This is the Shvirat HaKelim. This is the organuz, the light that gushed forth and created everything and was so huge that it broke the vessels. I mean, it's very difficult to understand unless you spend hours and hours and days and years on just a few paragraphs. The Sefer Bahir is also brightness, illumination. Notice how many elements of light are included in the mystical books. And it talks about the Shekhinah, divine feminine, about the Gilgul HaNefashot, the reincarnation of the souls. And it talks about the alphabet in such ways that each letter is really a building block of creation, has its own, not only shape and sound, but weight and number and significance. And it's extremely moving. You wouldn't think that learning about the alphabet would be anything other than just decoding a language. No, 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 no. I have been moved to tears with deep study on the letters. And I have the letters on my bulletin board with their corresponding numbers and with their corresponding weights and meanings. And we can go more into that, you know, at a more advanced study. And we spoke about some of the mystical teachers. We very often talk about Lurianic Kabbalah, which is mostly the one that's studied now. And some of the vocabulary words were Tzimtzum, cute word, Tzimtzum. It's where you contract to make space for creation. God did that, and we do that. We do that with children, with students, with congregants. We do that with people to leave room for other people to come forward. Because if you take up all the space, there's no room for anyone else to do anything. So Tzimtzum, it's a contraction for a good reason. The shattering of the vessels, Shavirat HaKelim. And our task is to find those holy sparks in the shards. That's Nitzotzot are the shards. Like Nitzot are sparks. So when we say a blessing, we're raising the sparks in the food or in our daily activities when we do mitzvot, and we're raising those sparks back to their holy source. And we do tikkun, which is a kind of repair and healing through our deeds. Each one of these deserves a lecture and a study and different texts, but this is just an outline and an overview. Some of the mystical teachings that have been the reason that some people convert to Judaism, frankly, are that the soul is pure, that we are each responsible for our own sins, and that there's a way back through sincere repentance, that we get back to that pure state. Every single morning, there's a blessing that says, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tohorahi. The soul you have given me is pure. You formed it, put it into me, you'll take it back at some time. But basically, our souls are pure, and there are ways to get back to that pure state. We're supposed to clean the slate every night when we say the bedtime Shema. We're supposed to clean that slate before the new moon. We certainly are supposed to be repentant and start over at the New Year and Yom Kippur. We have so many times when we can sort of take care of that. But we're not born sinful, we're born pure. And the soul. We studied the 5 levels of soul, from the most basic aliveness that we share with all alive beings, to kind of the undifferentiated soul soup to which our souls, we think, return at the end of our life. And we do believe in an afterlife, but nobody's come back and told us, so we're not sure, and we're supposed to take our time in this life and do mitzvot and worry about that later. The 5 levels of soul were nefesh, ruach, neshama, and then way up there beyond what we can know in this lifetime, chaya, and yechida. That's where we're part of the Holy One and subsumed, because energy is not lost, but it just changes form. We also looked at the holy name, Yud, He, Vav, He, which we don't pronounce. When we come across it in the Torah, we say Adonai, which means Lord, or if we translate it, we might say God or Holy One or Presence with a capital P. And we looked at how this 4-letter name of God, the unpronounceable 4 letters, are actually inscribed on our own bodies, the head, the shoulders, the spine, and the lower, the hips and the legs. And so as we were looking at the 4 worlds, from the most concrete to the most godly and ethereal, we realized that these are stamped on our bodies as we walk through the world. We looked at the cycle of sacred seasons. We focused on Passover. That is why I wanted you to start today by giving us some of your impressions of your Seders. And they're no 2 alike, and yet they all share so much. We talked about the calendar and the sacred cycle of seasons and why there are 12 months, but sometimes 13 months. Why do we have a leap year that has an extra month? Because remember, it's a lunar calendar and the months don't quite add up to 365. So every few years we need a leap year with an extra month of Adar, which is the last month. And that month, Adar, then makes it so that we will have Nisan in the spring, because Passover always has to be in the spring. That's why we sometimes say, oh, the holidays are late this year, the holidays are early this year. They're always the same date on the Hebrew calendar. We just have to adjust to our solar calendar. And we reviewed the pilgrimage festivals that are in the Bible: Passover in the spring, Shavuot early summer, and Sukkot, the fall harvest. In ancient times, people came to Jerusalem, offered their sacrifices, and it was a very joyful time. And now we reenact those in our own way, in our own synagogues, and the agricultural roots of them have been reinvigorated since there's a modern Israel to celebrate the land and agriculture. And so since we were an urban people for so long, that is an added layer of celebration that I have enjoyed many years when I lived in Israel, and that is a kind of a renewed way of celebrating. The most important blessing you could know is the one to light candles, because that comes every Friday. So here we're going to hear that one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. If it's a holiday, it will be Ner Shel Yom Tov. And if it's Yom Tov is a good day or a holiday, or the Yiddish is Yontif, comes from Yom Tov. And if it's a holiday and Shabbat, you say Shel Shabbat b'Shel Yom Tov. So it could be both. Blessed are you, God, ruling over time and space or the universe. You sanctified us with commandments like lighting Shabbat candles. And we always add those nice 3 lines or some version of that at our synagogue about being blessed with Shabbat holiness, joy, peace, light. We have different versions of it. I wanted especially to focus on Passover because this is the time of year where we celebrate that. It's the Exodus from Egypt, and that's the basis of the Seder. And we read about it in the Haggadah, which means the telling. And we retell and relive the journey from oppression to freedom. And this is an example of the Shik Haggadah. I have 2 examples of that at home. And this is Ma Nishtana Halayla Hazeh, the beginning of the 4 questions. And they decorated and illuminated the beautiful mem with the child asking one of the 4 questions in front of the elder who is making sure he does it right, but kvelling, being very proud of the younger child. We talked about our Seder plates, and this is a very modern one because you see there's an orange on the Seder plate, which is an innovation of the last about 20 years, symbolizing marginalized people, women, any marginalized people who feel that they're left out. We want to include them and say they're juicy parts of the whole. As you remember, there's a traditional Seder plate. We tasted bitter herbs, reminding of slavery. Charoset, that's the apples or the date mixture that reminds us of the mortar and the bricks used to build Pharaoh's cities. Parsley, which is spring, which we dip in salt water for the tears of slavery. The lamb bone, it's the lamb sacrifice and also the mighty arm of the Holy One. On a vegetarian plate, this might be a beet because it looks, red. The roasted egg is the festival sacrifice that represents all the sacrifices of those pilgrimage holidays. And matzah, which is so interesting because it's the bread of affliction, but flip it to the other side, and it's the bread of hope and freedom. And that whole week, no leavened breads or products. Very, very careful in what we eat. We go back to flat beginnings, getting rid of ego, being simple, and it's a good psychological as well as physical return to origins. The themes of Passover involve the children so that they will learn the story, and they ask, why is this night different from all other nights? They search for the afikomen, which keeps them interested. It's like a treasure hunt. And we had a lady who's quite grown up. I mean, she's of our age, but she felt like a child, and she went looking for the afikomen, and I gave her a badge, and she was so happy. She cried. She said, I felt like I was a little child with my father again. It was so moving to me. Now remember that our holy times, our Moadim l'Simcha, our seasons, they have various layers of meaning. There's one that's agricultural, about growing and harvesting. And they have a historical aspect, receiving Torah, walking in Mount Sinai, all that. Then there are symbols, foods, songs, customs for each of the holidays. Dairy is coming up for Shavuot, and we really love it if you'd come and help and bring some cheesecake or fruit for our May 25th celebration of Shavuot. And then there are the spiritual teachings. There are the applications to our lives. And for each holiday, there's something that you can learn, something you can eat, something you can sing, but also something that you can meditate on and apply to your life. So finally, I want to talk about the modern holidays. Yom HaShoah was a week and a half ago, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it's in remembrance of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, because it's not just Holocaust remembrance, it's Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura. It's also about the courage in uprising and resistance. And so that's why they picked this date for that. And we celebrated it 2 Fridays ago. And then Yom HaZikaron is today. It's the memorial day for the fallen soldiers in all the wars of Israel and the victims of actions of terrorism. And Yitzhak and I have been watching Israeli television since last night and early this morning at the cemeteries in Israel, and what they have, mishpachot shekulot, which means bereaved families who lost young men and now women too, as soldiers, and there were stories about their lives and how they're mourned and how they're honored. It's not like Memorial Day in this country. It really is a Memorial Day. It really is something. They blow a siren, and everyone stops wherever they are. Even if you're driving, you get out of your car, and you see highways with people outside their car just standing in the middle of the road. It's goosebumpy. It's so moving. And then they blow a siren tonight. It's already happened because they're 10 hours ahead, but the siren blows again, and it turns into Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day. And that's tomorrow, commemorating the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948. And we will be marking that this Friday with Hatikva, which is the national anthem of Israel, as we'll face the Israeli flag. And we'll have the choir singing, and there are other reasons we're going to be celebrating, including Marissa's bat mitzvah. She's going to be giving the drash, and she will chant from Torah with Torah portion Kedoshim that contains the holiness code. She's been wanting that for over 4 years, so we're finally being able to celebrate that. Please come if you can. And we'll be counting the Omer, which we'll do at the conclusion of this, a little bit early, but we'll do it at the conclusion of this service, of this study. And we're Tuesday evening in the week of Tiferet. So we'll be counting Yesod of Tiferet, which is foundation within balance and harmony. A lovely, lovely day. We'll be meditating on that tomorrow in our Wednesday meditation class. And this beautiful calendar keeps us on track by Patty Hoysh. She put in the colors and the dates so that we would stay on track. So we'll be doing that at the conclusion after our discussion. Just to remind you of the tree of life, each sephira or energy center is a form of creative energy. From the top, which is Keter, the yearning, the wish to do something. May there be light. You know, it's like the first thing is wanting something and moving toward Chokhmah and Bina and the sort of hidden sephira of Dot, of knowing. And then the lower 7, which is what we count during this time of counting the Omer between Passover and Shavuot, the first week of Chesed, loving kindness, outpouring, balanced by the next week of Gevurah, discipline, boundaries, limits. And this week is Tiferet, which is the heart space, and it's the balance of the two. And then next week we'll be in Netzach, which is long-range goals and persistence, balanced by Hod, which is beauty and splendor and ease and grace, balanced with Yesod, which is foundation, and then going to the last week of Malchut, which is total groundedness and manifestation. Boy, that's really on one foot. Each of these deserves enormous attention. But again, this was just an overview to get you interested in seeing what you want to study going forward. We also talked about, and we in our meditation, we talk about how these sephirot show up in our bodies, and that you can meditate on the different columns or the triangles or the patterns, the flow. So I'm going to talk about the flow from the highest triangle down through the low triangle and down to Malchut. That is a meditation that people do. Also very powerful, using the vowels and taking a certain word like ahava, which is love, or even taking the yud he vav he, the holy name, and practicing it and chanting it with the ha and the hey and the he, Gevura has almost no sound. Ho, he, who, different who, and I guess there are different ways, different systems, but it's a very powerful thing when you're chanting using the different vowels. And I can tell you from experience that if you're not grounded, you can really go out of body. So from all of that, I wanted to kind of end with the morning blessing, the blessing of gratitude, the blessing of just being aware that you're alive and you've been given this gift. And so the first thing we're supposed to say in the morning is Moda'ani for a woman, Moda'ani for a man. And I'll just read it for you. Moda'ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shehechezarta bi nishmati bechemla Rabba emunatecha. And if you just want to summarize that, you can just say Moda'ani, which means thankful am I before you, ruler of life and sustaining, that you gave me, that you returned to me, my soul, with mercy. Great is your faithfulness in me. Because this is said in the morning when we have consciousness again after being unconscious during the night. So it's as if your soul was taken out and shined up and given back to you and not to be taken for granted. And I added here, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. God, this soul you have given me, she is pure. It's a feminine word in Hebrew. And sometimes we chant this. It's so beautiful to chant, to take out of a whole prayer just a line or just a word, and to go over it and over it and over it till it really becomes part of you and you become part of the chant. Sort of like this. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi, tehorahi. Imagine doing that with 200 people with Shefa Gold in a morning service out in the countryside under a blue sky for about 10-15 minutes. Whoa, you really get it. And of course, the first and last thing that we would say, that we would learn, first thing you teach to children, the last thing you're supposed to say before you take your last breath is Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And when you see it in the Torah, the Ayin and the Dalet are always written bigger, because if you put them together, they spell Ed, which is witness. And we are witness that God is one, indivisible, unique, part of all the oneness that we're a part of. It's even impossible to translate, but we are witness to that oneness. And then in a whisper, we add Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed is God's glorious name forever and ever, for all worlds. And that is the review and the going ahead for this week, to give you some basis, some grounding of our history, our text, our mysterious teachings, our application to daily life that Judaism represents. So, questions, comments, before we count the Omer and decide what steps you might want to take next. Unmute and just respond. Nancy?
What I was say that what I was going to say is that when you were describing all of the different books, there's a lot, and as someone who's just starting this, it's a little overwhelming, but very exciting, and I'm trying to figure out what's next. I've been studying the Parsha, as who knows that better than you, for a couple of years, and I'm trying to figure out that next book. And I realized today that it probably should be the prophets, because that comes after the Torah. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be Joshua coming in, leading up to Kings. It gets very historical, but you dive in wherever you dive in, wherever you find a teacher. Some people want to know the history. Other people say, I want to know the mystery, history and mystery. You know, those are two good strands that exist. And life, God willing, is long, and you can just keep studying. It's without an end.
It is. It really, it's amazing. And I'm really excited about counting the Omer. I'm really enjoying that, especially this year.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Other responses to this very dense packed material that I presented for you, the slides I made, the way I sort of whisked through it, but to give you some sort of basis for which to, like it's a seed that I've planted, hopefully in fertile soil, so that you can grow the tree now of learning. Especially for those of you for whom this is maybe the first time you've heard this information or not Jewish, I'd love to hear your response to this.
It is a lot. I'm amazed that there's so much of the symbolism, so much meaning to, it seems like, every aspect of it. It's not just doing customs and rites, but the meaning behind it. I find that amazing and very, very beautiful.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm going to have to mute you because there's background noise, but yes, we taste our history. We even the games, like when you have a dreidel game of spinning the top in, I need to keep you muted there. At Hanukkah, Nes Gadol Haya Sham, even though the letters on the dreidel say a great miracle happened there. And so the kids love to play the game, grown-ups love to play games, but there's always a teaching underneath. There's something historical, there's something mystical, there's something agricultural, there's some reminder, collapsing time and space and taking us to be walking with our ancestors as if it were all happening right now. Further comments or responses? Yes, Anne?
Well, I thought it was, I think I'm probably stating the obvious when I say that, it seems that every rabbi and every teacher, I mean, what I love about this is that you hear something different, and when I read passages from different rabbis in some of the books that I've received, I hear a different perspective. And then I took that year-long class that was, huge and full of all sorts of things. And yet I learned new things here and different angles. Do you know what I mean? It was the same thing, but there was another nuance, or there was.
Right, well, I'm sure that since you had a year-long course that covered holidays and prayers and history and stuff, that you were able to connect, because this was not your first pass over this information, that you were able to really grasp more because it was not the first time.
Right, that was helpful, but I also heard new things, which I loved, and I just love that the Jewish people are the people of the book, because I think that learning is just super fun. It's like, yay. So thank you.
So you're welcome. We are people of the book, and that is one way that throughout history, our enemies have tried to suppress us by burning our books. But we always reconstructed them and republished them. The Nazis did that. There were huge book burnings. I did once a lecture on book burnings. And I went back, and it started way early when it was just manuscripts, and the history of book burning to try to squelch learning and transfer from generation to generation was a real thing throughout history. Other responses, questions? I mean, I know this was very dense. I sort of poured my heart into this, and just without looking up things, I just said, what do I want to teach? And I just made slides for each aspect of it, just from my heart and my head for you.
Could we get a copy of the slides?
You'd like a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yes,
I could do that.
Thank you.
that would be great.
I don't know if I have all of your emails, and I would suggest, since I don't, that if you want it, you write to me. I'll put my email in the chat, and I will respond to anybody who asks. Let me just put that in the chat. Okay, if you write to me there and say, I was in your Intro to Judaism class and I would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I'll see if I can. It might be too large to send, in which case I'll get help with some kind of Google Docs or something, but maybe I can send it. Thank you for asking.
It's so much, you know, it's so much.
Each slide is a class.
Each slide, each slide is a class, and a class that I don't know about anyone else, but sign me up. The spirituality, I had no idea of the books that were, I knew that there was a Zohar. I had no idea of the other ones.
So this was like a tiptoe, like dipping your toe into the sea. So now that we're a little wet, we can splash around a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes, Sandra.
What is the difference between what you're teaching and, say, the Orthodox Jewish philosophies?
Well,
or-
the Orthodox would probably stay with the Torah and the Talmud, and they would say everything is the word of God, and their interpretations would be more narrow than mine. And the prayer book has slight differences in some of the prayers. I've been teaching that to rabbis, cantors, chaplains, and education students in my seminary, the Academy for Jewish Religion. And what we did was we took an Orthodox, a conservative, a Reform, a Reconstructionist, and a Renewal prayer books, and we compared some of the prayers. And because of certain theological differences, I won't go into that now, we saw how some of the Hebrew was changed and certainly how the English translations were changed. But the basis is the same. The Torah, the word of Torah, the Hebrew is completely the same. It's our interpretation and how much we're adapting to modern needs and circumstances. Those are the big differences. It's a reasonable question. I'm at the liberal end. What can I say? Any other comments that you want to make? All right, well, you can always write to me. You can always ask. You can always pick up the phone, call the synagogue. I'll get back to you. And I'll take a break from teaching for a while, and then we'll start a new class probably in the fall. All right, I'm going to pretend that the light is falling and that it's already evening, just because I'd like us to be counting buddies and counting the Omer together. Traditionally, you wait till it's dark and you do it for that evening and for the next morning. And traditionally, you don't say what the day is because you don't want to get confused. You say, what did we count yesterday? And they tell you, and then you go, okay, so then you know what you count today. Because if you say today, then you get confused. Are we counting that tonight or did we do it already? So traditionally, you say, what did we count yesterday? So what did we count yesterday? We counted
The hood of Tiferet.
Right, we counted the hood of Tiferet, which was Monday evening, and it was the 19th. What they would say is we counted the 19th, which leads us to say we're going to be counting the next number, 19 plus 1. And so I will share the screen. Let's see how it comes up. All right, let me change it. Let me move this. All right, so this is counting the Omer, and Patty Hoysh took the assignment of creating this for us. And so since we started the day after the first Seder, which was Wednesday, so Thursday evening we started day 1, and we're now Yesterday we counted 19. And as Nancy said, it was Hod of the week of Tiferet. These are the days, and these are the weeks. And so we're in this wonderful week of Tiferet, which is the balance, harmony, beauty place. And as we go down, this will be the last week, the 7th week. But right now we're here, and it's Tuesday evening, and I'll say the blessing. And it's the last 2 words are Al Sfirat HaOmer, on the counting of the Omer. And Omer is actually a sheaf of wheat, which is why it's waving wheat over here. And so it's the waiting and watching between Passover and Shavuot. It's all connected time. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. Thank you for giving us opportunities to connect with holiness, such as counting the Omer. Today is the 20th day, which is 2 weeks and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days of counting the Omer. Oh, sorry. Today is what? Today is Tuesday evening. Yes. Yesod Sheba Tiferet, which is foundation. Really foundation. What's your foundation within your balance and splendor and beauty and heart space? So how do you find the foundation of your faith, of your balance in walking in the world? And you have to look at your foundation. So that's for tonight and tomorrow, because all of the Jewish holidays and all of the Jewish days begin in the evening till the next evening. So it's Tuesday evening and all of Wednesday. And the reason for that is in the days of creation in the Torah, it says Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, Yom Echad, and there was evening and there was morning, one day. So everything starts in the evening. We light candles for Shabbat in the evening. We light candles for the holidays in the evening. And then the next day is the actual continuation of that holiday. Questions about just this, about counting the Omer, or where we are in the count, or how it continues to tomorrow? Right, you're taking this all in, and it took me years to get this. Nancy.
Well, it took me years too, and I've been doing it for 4 years now. And I just want to reiterate to everyone, as I always say to you, I think it's the most amazing self-improvement program that a person could possibly be on. Because if you understand what each of these are, they're different parts of your heart, and your soul, and you really get a cleansing. And it just is amazing to me that you do the same thing year after year, and it's like a completely different experience. And I would advise or suggest to anyone that if you could find out about this on any level, I would suggest it wholeheartedly. And in fact, I look forward to this time of year just so I could be thinking about this a lot.
Amen, me too. I feel bereft after Shavuot. I think, well, what am I supposed to be concentrating and counting today?
No, but it's something like this for Elul.
Yes, they're the 60 days where you count through Elul, going to the High Holy Days. So August, September is that kind of the opposite end of the year kind of counting.
So we have a couple of months to absorb it after the counting is over, and then we get to see, okay, did we stick with our New Year's resolutions?
Very good. I'm glad you said that. So I really want to offer a blessing to everyone who stuck with this class, who came each time. And I hope that you have expanded your understanding and that you feel more confident about what Judaism is about, what we believe, and how we express our connection with the Holy One, and the flexibility of this beautiful way of life, where you're not forced to believe a certain way or a certain doxology, but rather to ask questions and to test and to rub against other people's ideas with the knowledge that you are loved and held, and that God has belief in us, even when we lose our belief or we're in doubt. And it's a very, to me, it's a very life affirming way of life that helps us with our choices every day, helps us live an ethical life where we're considerate of others and compassionate to others, and that we help others. And we don't think so much about the afterlife or reward or so much about what we believe, but more about how we can do good actions in the world. And if we do that, then the whole world will be a better place and it'll be like heaven on earth. That's my ending for this class. And I thank you all for coming. It helped me crystallize my thought, because I stared at an empty screen thinking, oh my gosh, Introduction to Judaism, where do I begin? And so I just jumped in and said, this is what I know, and let's start together. And that's how this course came to be. Shalom, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.